and now that we see, you know, uh, a lot more things are opening up. We see people are getting out and about now, and as we can see in some of the black communities in our communities, we saw in Chicago. I believe it was last weekend or the weekend before last. I think like 100 and something people got shot. I don't know if it was in a day or the entire weekend, and a lot of people lost their lives, including small children, which was very unfortunate, which was very crazy. And, also where I grew up at, I don't particularly live in that town anymore, but I'm right next door. Our church is still in that town. In the town that I grew up in this last week, three individuals have been killed and a lot of people have been shot. So this is a reality. When it comes to our communities, it is a reality. Yes, people are losing their lives. And the unfortunate thing is, one of the young men that have lost their lives, the last young man to lose his life, I know his father and his mother, and I know that they have to be devastated. I know that they're devastated. This has to be super hard for them, but these are the things that we need to work on and talk about and try to figure out solutions, just like people are trying to figure out solutions when it comes to racism and police brutality. And I'm not saying that people aren't trying to find out these solutions in our communities, because they are. I've seen people that tried to come up with programs and just tried to come up with educating those in the community, the younger people, trying to find something for them to do, because right now it's really just a bunch of, in the community I grew up in, right now it's just a bunch of young people running around, quote unquote, gang, a gang beef or being gang affiliated. The same thing that man has been doing in our communities. I won't say since the beginning of the time, because our communities wasn't always like this, but whenever that gang type of thing started and it began to become violent, because originally it didn't start out for those purposes, but since it's become violent and turned into what it has turned into, it's just been a cycle, because those that are in our community, the younger ones, they're only going to emulate what they see. They're only going to follow behind, what it is the ones before them are teaching them. And that's why we have to continually, find a way to educate them, continually find a way to live a different type of lifestyle in front of them, so that they can see that there is different. Listen, I grew up in my town. When I was younger, you're talking the 90s or whatever have you. Believe it or not, when I was growing up, it was even worse than it is now. Like, when you hear people talk about it now, like we see 3 individuals get killed in a week, and you hear people discuss what's going on, they almost talk from a perspective of like, this is the craziest thing they ever seen. But the truth be told, it was way worse when I was growing up. Right now, the average, killings that we have every year, which any killing is terrible, but the average amount of killings we have now per year, when I was growing up, it was 3 to 4 times that number. So God has truly been merciful, on the town that I grew up in. It is truly not how it used to be. And I think some of it came from, them tearing down some of the projects that we had, because Father Panic Village, which was up back then, was one of the worst projects in U.S. So, and then some of the neighborhoods was just as bad as some of the projects. So things have definitely calmed down. Things have definitely changed. God has been merciful, but we pray that that number can go down to 0 if possible. But yes, without a shadow of a doubt, we have problems, these type of problems in our communities, but we are not the only one that has these types of problems. Like I said, there's murder going on everywhere, but we can't, as a community, we can't start pointing, over to white on white crime. We can't point over to police brutality. Yes, those things need to be addressed, but we also have to continually work on addressing those things in our community. But I'm thankful that, the city I grew up in is not as bad as it used to be, and that's Bridgeport, Connecticut. If I didn't mention it, it was really a tough place to live in the 80s and the 90s. It was really wild. And like I said, I'm thankful that it's not like it used to be. But guess what? God, he changed my life. God enabled me to have a change of heart, a change of mentality. And now I'm raising two sons that by the grace of God, they won't go through what I went through. But here's something that's really crazy. We only live a town over, but where we live, there's really nothing going on and nothing crazy happening. But we ended up going, I brought my sons one day, just a quick story, just to show you that, once again, the stuff that we see in our communities, this stuff we really have to address it and really strive to pray and figure out a way to get these things to stop. But I brought my sons to a diner in Bridgeport where I grew up at, I think I ran in to grab some carrot cake or whatever have you. But before I went in, I saw an individual that I knew. So we're in the parking lot just talking for a minute, and my sons are right there in the car. My sons don't know what weed is, drugs, drinking. They don't know any of that stuff, So they've never been around any type of violence or seen anybody fighting on the street or getting crazy. So they're sitting in the car. I'm talking to the man, and all of a sudden I hear pop, pop, pop. And I'm looking because I'm like, first of all, that's not firecrackers. And it sounds really, really close. And it wasn't until I moved to the side a little bit that when I looked directly across the street, I see two young boys. They got masks on and they're just shooting at somebody. Boom, 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 boom. So I scrambled to the car because now I got to try to get to the car to get my sons down because, their back is towards where we are and they're shooting the other way. But I don't know if somebody's getting ready to shoot back. So that means the bullets are going to start coming our way. And I had to scramble to make sure my sons was down because, like I said, they're ignorant to what's going on. They don't really know, what they should do in this type of situation. I do because I grew up in this type of environment. So when it was all said and done, I literally watched these two guys shoot, run to the car. I see the exact car they get in, take off. It just was crazy. They jumped in the car with no license plate, take off, whatever have you. And I'm like, man, my sons could have got killed today just going, with me just bringing them to get something to eat in a place where I grew up in because these young people are out here trying to live something that they don't really understand what's going on. And that whole entire day, I was so hurt by that. Not only that my sons, could have got killed, but the fact that they had never been exposed to that. And all day, that's the only thing they kept asking about. Daddy, they were shooting, that was something they had never experienced, and it hurt me so bad because that was something that I never wanted them to experience. But it just goes to show you, look, what if they would have killed my sons? One of my sons that had nothing to do with anything. And this is why a lot of this stuff is so ignorant. You know what I mean? Whether it's coming from our community, whether it's coming from another community, whether it's coming from a police officer, whether it's coming from a Klan member, I don't care who it's coming from. Like, this stuff has to stop. But the only way that it's going to stop is through Jesus Christ. The only way that you're going to have a true heart change is through the Lord. And that's why I say, unfortunately, I don't necessarily see any of this stuff stopping totally, because guess what? Everybody is not going to surrender to Christ. Everybody is not going to turn their life over to the Lord and ask him, what must I do to be saved? What must I do to change? Prayerfully, some of us that are saved and some of us that have access to these different individuals can at least talk some sense into them and pray that the Lord will at least be even more the merciful. But guess what? Evil is always going to be here. There's always going to be a heart problem. Why? Because, man, most times when you talk to most individuals today, I don't care what race they are, or I don't believe in God, and the people in my community, that's the white man's religion, which is not true. It's just, there's all of these types of excuses of why they don't want to deal with God.